One of the very first videos we actually made for the Clan of the Grey Wolf was Rue and myself attending a Play video game symphony locally in the area, and you can see how I made the news if you want to go look that one up. Speaking well about video games. Anyway, so I do love those things. A couple of them that you already know about me if you know anything about this site. First of all, YouTube poop is a guilty pleasure of mine. I freely admit it, but I'm telling you it's a guilty pleasure. I have certain YouTube poop channels absolutely bookmarked because I go back to them again and again and again. They make me laugh. They're stupid. Sometimes they don't even make sense. But because they're so geeky and because they're so stupid, and I guess because I have sometimes the comedic sense of humor of a 5-year-old, I absolutely find them hilarious. And I'm always showing them to Rue and Boomer, and they are always scowling at me like there is something horribly wrong with me. And there might be, but I love YouTube poop. So and if you don't know what that is, go check it out. I even wrote a blog post about it many, many, many months, maybe even years ago. SpongeBob SquarePants is also a guilty pleasure of mine. I do enjoy SpongeBob. I really, really, really enjoy cartoons that work on two levels. I love cartoons that have this kind of kiddie facade about them, but really have something that's a little bit deeper that makes adults laugh or enjoy adults. Really, this comes from being raised on the Muppets and Jim Henson. Jim Henson is an absolute blessing to the world, and Jim Henson has so incredibly changed my life. I wish he were still alive, making stuff for kids these days, because there's such a deficit now that Jim Henson's gone. And thinking about this now, I've got to talk about Jim Henson in the future in a weekly Wringer. So we'll definitely get to something Jim Henson related. Anyway, but SpongeBob works in the same way that the Muppets did, where there's a lot going on for kids. There's visual, and there's kind of the moral going on here. But then they have Animaniacs was the same way. They have a lot going on from the adult level so that adults can watch it and laugh along too. And then what happens is you end up going back and watching something as an adult that you watched as a kid, and you can really, really enjoy it. So I really like SpongeBob SquarePants. There's a lot more than meets the eye, and I love it. And I've been challenged on this many, many times over from all kinds of different adult communities that I'm actually a part of, saying, you watch SpongeBob, and I stand up and I defiantly defend that show. Because if more shows were like SpongeBob SquarePants, and we had fewer shows out there that are just total nonsensical garbage like they have today, then I think our kids would be a heck of a lot smarter. And I'm getting off my soapbox now, but SpongeBob is one of my guilty pleasures. Here are the ones, though, that I got it down to two, and they were the ones that I most connected to when I asked this question of you. So, number one is fantasy art. I really, really like fantasy art. Ever since I started collecting Magic cards back in the day, I loved the idea of having these kinds of really created worlds. I love the scenery and the landscapes. I'm not necessarily a huge dragon kind of guy. Some people are really into dragons and things like that. That's not really what I mean. I just like fantasy art. I like the fantasy worlds. I like even sci-fi kinds of themes. But I really enjoy good fantasy art. And while I certainly don't collect it, I have several websites, and when I get to my new location, I think one of the things I'm going to be covering, I always wanted to have a kind of a cave room where I could just throw a bunch of fantasy art. So I'm going to do that. So that's one of them. But here's the other one, and this is kind of hard to describe. So you guys are going to have to follow me on this. But I have a guilty pleasure for 70s and 80s PBS specials. Now, I know that's going to sound weird to some of you, but there's not any real particular rhyme or reason. It doesn't have to be specials either. It could be series. But I really love things that are really old, that show they're like a sign of the times, of the culture, and they're also doing something educational where I can learn something. There's some tremendous series that you turn to PBS at 3 o'clock in the morning sometimes, and you'll see these old history documentaries that are like taped world civilization classes. And I love those, from like 1989 or 1990. And you go and watch them, and some of them are even really outdated, but they give you a sense of what people were teaching back then. And I love that stuff. Everything from Bob Ross to stuff that, just documentaries about how, not documentaries, but specials about typing and how to use the English language correctly. That stuff just gets me going. I know that sounds really stupid, and that's why I guess it's a guilty pleasure, but that absolutely encompasses the guilty pleasures that I have. Old PBS shows. They really get me going. That's a guilty pleasure I have to plug into every once in a while. I love documentaries. I love learning new things. I have a thirst for knowledge. It's kind of one of the things that make me geeky. I think you all are probably in some way, or in some sense, I guess, the same way. But in any case, that's something I really like. All right. Now, I fully intended this to be a shorter weekly ringer this week, and I can see that's just not going to happen. So I'm sorry? Question mark, question mark, question mark. Now I want to get to the weekly ringer for next week. This has no basis in what's going on in current events. It's just a question. I have a vault locked away somewhere. It's a virtual vault, and in this virtual vault, I have lots and lots and lots of weekly ringer questions that might or might not ever see the light of day, that I have stockpiled ready to use in just such an occasion. And one of them is not, in the strictest sense, a question, inasmuch as I'm not going to be asking you a question that you then have to answer. What I am going to do is I'm going to do just like some of your old tests you used to take in high school used to do. I'm going to give you a fill-in-the-blank this week. This week, your task is to fill in the blank, but then the real fun part becomes then you have to explain why, okay? So don't just fill in the blank unless you just feel so adamant about this answer. That's fine, but give me a why. That goes for all the weekly ringers. You guys know that, but I'm just reminding everybody out there. So here is the weekly ringer for next week. Here's the sentence you must complete. Nickelodeon used to have a show that most accurately represented my personality. Its title was blank. Think about that one. Get on it. And remember, you're talking about yourself, not me as in me. You're thinking about yourself. If you were saying that sentence, what would your answer be? Anyway, guys, that is the weekly ringer for next week. Thanks, as always, for watching. Can't wait to see your contributions for next week. I am the Commodore from the clan of the Grey Wolf, and there is no reset button.